The city had long fallen silent, except for the occasional hum of distant traffic under the cool night air. Inside the glass-walled corporate tower, a single dim emergency light reflected off the polished marble floors. It was close to midnight when Elena Hart, the newly appointed CEO of one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech firms, stepped out of the elevator, heels clicking softly. Dressed in a deep red silk blouse tucked into fitted black jeans and a sharp-tailored blazer, her presence carried a quiet authority. Yet her expression was restless tonight, her thoughts tangled after another brutal day in the boardroom. As she crossed the lobby, she paused. Near the far corner, half hidden behind a pillar, a young man sat hunched on the cold floor with a small flashlight balanced awkwardly on his knee. His security uniform was faded, the edges frayed, and his shoes were worn nearly through. A battered duct-taped backpack sat open beside him, revealing dog-eared textbooks stacked on top of crumpled receipts. He didn't notice her at first, too lost in scribbling equations into a cheap spiral notebook. Elena's brows furrowed. "Studying?" she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to make him jolt. The young guard looked up, startled. His tired brown eyes widened as recognition flashed across his face. "Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I wasn't slacking, I promise. It's just, I've got finals next week." She tilted her head slightly, her glossy waves falling over one shoulder. "Finals? While working the night shift?" He hesitated, embarrassed, clutching his pen tighter. "Yeah, I'm trying to get my engineering degree. My mom's sick and I just need this job to pay the bills. I study when it's quiet." Elena crouched slightly, her dark leather jacket brushing against the cool marble as she lowered herself to his level. "What's your name?" "Jaden," he said quietly, his throat tightening around the syllables. Her sharp, polished exterior softened, but she masked it with a neutral tone. "Jaden, why didn't you ask for help? Your working nights, studying days. When do you even sleep?" He gave a small, nervous smile, brushing the back of his hand over his weary eyes. "I'll sleep when things get better. Right now it's just survival mode." Something about his tone, resigned, quiet yet unwavering, unsettled her. There was dignity in his exhaustion, the kind that couldn't be faked. She noticed the taped straps of his backpack, the cheap coffee cup half empty beside him, and the worn notebook filled with determination scribbled in blue ink. A faint hum of cold air from the vents brushed past them, amplifying the silence that hung between them. As she stood, Elena caught her reflection in the glass door. Polished shoes, bold lipstick, expensive fabrics. Behind her, Jaden sat cross-legged in a faded uniform on the cold floor, an entire world of struggle she hadn't touched in years. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of her privilege like a quiet ache pressing into her chest. Re-hook. 2 floors above, an office window slammed shut, startling them both. Jaden's hand instinctively moved to his security radio, but no call came through. The tension in the quiet lobby deepened. Elena broke it with a simple, unexpected question. "Jaden," she said softly, "what's your dream? What happens after this degree?" His lips parted, but he hesitated, as if afraid to speak something so fragile out loud. "I want to design sustainable housing. My mom and I got evicted when I was 15, spent 2 months sleeping on bus benches, eating dollar burgers. I want to make homes people can actually afford, ones that don't leak when it rains." For a moment, Elena couldn't look at him. She remembered being 16, living with her single mother in a tiny apartment where the fridge light flickered over 3 eggs and an almost empty carton of milk. She had fought her way up from food stamps to boardrooms, and yet somewhere along the way, she'd built walls so high she'd almost forgotten where she came from. She exhaled slowly, forcing a steady tone. "I see, that's ambitious." Jaden smiled faintly, more out of habit than hope. "Ambition's cheap. Tuition isn't." Her chest tightened. The irony stung. Upstairs, her executives debated bonuses over cocktails. And here, in the cold silence below, someone who kept their building safe counted coins for textbooks. Before she could respond, a voice crackled over Jaden's radio. "Jaden, you there? We've got an issue on the east exit. Motion sensors went off." He jumped up, grabbing his flashlight, his notebook sliding shut against his chest. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I have to." Elena caught his wrist gently, surprising him. Her grip was soft but firm, her eyes steady. "Go, but we're not done talking." As Jaden hurried off into the dim hallway, Elena stood rooted in place, her heart unsettled in a way she hadn't felt in years. Something about this night, about this boy studying under a flashlight, refused to let her walk away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a reminder about tomorrow's investors' breakfast, but her thoughts stayed on Jaden's weary hands and determined eyes. She didn't know why yet, but a decision was forming quietly inside her, one that would change both their lives. She turned toward the glass doors, watching the faint reflection of city lights beyond. For the first time, the vast emptiness of her own success felt louder than ever. Elena barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jaden's tired face, the flicker of his cheap flashlight, and the duct-taped straps of his backpack. By morning, the city was waking under a soft drizzle, neon signs glowing faintly against the wet sidewalks. She slipped into a dark green trench coat, pulled her waves into a loose twist, and headed to the office earlier than she had in years. Jaden was on his way out when she arrived, his uniform damp around the cuffs, the same battered backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked surprised to see her there before sunrise. "Long night?" she asked gently. He nodded, adjusting the strap. East exit sensor went off. "False alarm. Got my She hesitated, then asked, "Do you trust me, Jaden?" He blinked, clearly confused. I guess." "Good. Meet me in the cafe across the street after your exam. Noon." He opened his mouth to protest, but something in her tone, quiet, steady, absolute, made him nod without asking why. By noon, the cafe buzzed softly with low chatter and clinking mugs. The air smelled of roasted espresso and rain-soaked streets. Elena sat by the window, dressed in an elegant cream blouse and fitted navy skirt, tapping her manicured nails against a porcelain cup. When Jaden walked in, dripping slightly from the drizzle, his cheeks flushed as he realized every polished detail of this cafe screamed money he didn't have. He hesitated by the door, clutching his frayed backpack tighter. She waved him over. "Sit." He slid into the booth cautiously. "Listen, Ms. Hart, if this is about me studying on the job, It's not." She interrupted softly, leaning forward, her perfume faint but distinct. "Jaden, I know what it feels like to carry too much on your back and still try to stand tall. I used to live like that." His eyebrows drew together, skeptical. "You?" She smiled faintly, swirling the spoon in her coffee. "Single mom, no heat in the winters, fridge light flickering over 3 eggs and expired milk. I know what it means to fight for air." Jaden sat back, startled. He had seen her sharp suits, glossy heels, the confident stride through polished lobbies. Hearing this from her felt impossible. She reached into her bag and slid a crisp white envelope across the table. He stared at it like it was dangerous. "What's this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Tuition," she said simply. "For the next semester. No strings." He froze, hands trembling slightly. I can't accept that." "Yes, you can," she replied firmly, holding his gaze. "Consider it an investment. You have a vision, Jaden. Sustainable housing, affordable living. The world needs people like you who've lived the hardship and still believe in fixing it." His throat tightened, words catching somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," she said softly. "Just promise me you'll finish." Tears pooled but didn't fall. He clenched his jaw, nodding slowly. "I promise." For a moment, silence filled the booth, broken only by the soft hiss of the espresso machine in the background. Then Jaden's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and stiffened, eyes clouding instantly. Elena noticed. "What is it?" He hesitated, then handed her the screen. "An eviction notice. Final warning." The due date was 3 days away. Elena exhaled sharply, leaning back. She thought of her own mother clutching crumpled bills in a grocery store line years ago, the shame burning deeper than hunger. Without thinking, she pulled her phone from her blazer and typed swiftly. Seconds later, she slid it back into her bag. "It's handled," she said softly. Jaden blinked at her, startled. "What do you mean?" "I called the landlord. You're paid up for 6 months. His lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time, his shoulders shook slightly, the weight lifting just enough for breath to return. He covered his face briefly with one hand, embarrassed by the tears threatening to fall in a public cafe. "Elena," he whispered finally, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" She leaned forward, resting her hands gently on the table, her polished nails tapping once against the wood. "Because someone once did it for me, and because one act of kindness rerouted my life." That afternoon, Jaden walked out into the drizzle with the envelope clutched to his chest, the cafe's warmth lingering like a phantom. The weight on his back hadn't disappeared, but for the first time in years, he wasn't carrying it alone. Months passed. Jaden worked nights, studied days, and poured himself into his engineering courses with a fire that wouldn't quit. Elena checked in quietly, never overstepping, never demanding gratitude. Then one spring afternoon she received a message. "I passed. Top of my class. Thank you." Elena smiled softly, staring at the city skyline beyond her office window. Below, the streets were crowded with strangers, each carrying invisible battles. But sometimes, when you looked closely, when you stopped long enough to notice, the smallest act of generosity could alter someone's entire story. That night, she left the office and paused by the lobby where she'd first seen him, hunched under that dim flashlight. The space was empty now, but somehow it felt fuller than ever. Because kindness, she realized, doesn't echo in boardrooms or press releases. It lives in quiet, unrecorded moments, between a struggling guard and an undercover CEO willing to notice.